Hi, I'm Diane Staver, and I'd like to talk to you about where I get my inspiration. I'm an older artist, and one of the advantages I think of being an older artist is that you can look back over the body of your artwork and you can see where work inspired you during the course of of your work. So I'm calling this my inspiration, years of looking at art and how it's become part of me. Inspiration is referred to as an artistic style, uh, is to refer to an artistic style, but to make it your own. An artist must be conscious of not losing their identity into another designer or artist's work. I'm inspired by works of master artists, color, nature, and man made structures. My interests include color, movement, mark, as in mark of a line, composition, especially asymmetrical balance. I like lots of busy movement in my work. I also like to establish a mood through color, value, and painting style. The following are samples of work that have been inspirational for me over the years. I will finish with samples of my own work, covering work going back some years. I hope that you'll see the connection between what inspires me and my work. So, first of all, subject matter. During the 1970s, I went to college at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. At that time, my work was all about realism. The color palettes I used were local color, nothing expressive or unexpected. I was terrified of using color, actually. The only risks I took were with subject matter. I was inspired by surrealism. The surrealists of the early 20th century were very playful and masters of painting techniques. They had to be able to convincingly paint textures and structures to make their surreal environments believable. Details and subject matter, another element of inspiration for me. The Art Institute is fortunate to own several paintings by Ivan Albright. Albright's attention to fine detail is mind blowing and very difficult to photograph. As to his subject matter, Albright has been labeled as the master of macabre. Although not a surrealist, his work similarly resonates with me. And if you have an opportunity to go to the Art Institute of Chicago, if you can, go see his work. As I said, these photos do nothing to show the depth of the detail. It's just fantastic work. Mark and color. Back in the 70s, excuse me, students at the School of the Art Institute used to be able to cut through the museum to try to save themselves a trip around the building in very cold winters. That was a pretty good idea. I'm sure they don't do that anymore. But I used to pass by this self portrait of Van Gogh, and I always fantasized that I could just slip that painting into my portfolio and just keep walking out the door. Of course, it never happened. But I do absolutely adore Van Gogh's mark and his color use. Another person that I really enjoy is the work of Paul Gauguin. He loves to flatten his forms, and he has such a beautiful color palette, especially if you look at the partial piece down below. The water has become flattened with these bright, unrealistic colors, very expressive colors. And it just blows my mind. In the piece up above, there's much more subtlety in the color. I love his work. One of the things that I really enjoyed while attending college in Chicago was that during my lunch breaks, I would go into the museum and visit the art. And one of my favorite places to go was to look at their collection of Japanese woodcuts. The compositions are phenomenal. The Japanese art that came into Europe during the 19th century ended up being the compositions inspired the artists of Europe at the time, and they're inspiring me as well. Um, not just the technique, but the interesting kind of flatness and that also goes on in the pieces. Another artist that I find very inspirational is Degas. His compositions and his use of asymmetrical balance are breathtaking to me. His willing to crop the picture plane, cutting objects off, or for example, the hat in the woman's hand on the in the left hand piece. Even part of her figure is cropped off, although she's a subject matter in the piece. I love his use of skin tones. If you look at the bather on the right side, just look at all the variety of color in the piece. They're just mesmerizing. In the 80s, my work took a different direction. I was breaking away from realism and heading towards abstract expressionism. There were several abstract expressionists whose work I really loved. William de Kooning was one of them. I love his mark. I love his color placement. I love the size of his work. It's such a beautiful expressiveness to his work. So, and I also found that in addition to being inspired by that, my work also got larger, like many of de Kooning's pieces. Odd subject matter and composition. I came across Roberto Matta in the 1990s. He's called an abstract surrealist, a term I had been unfamiliar with. Matta was born in Chile and began his career as an architect. I see the sense of structure in his paintings. It emits also a strange feeling which appeals to me. He is also abstract in his objects and figures. So my process. Over the years, I've created a large digital library of photographs. I've taken these throughout my wanderings. In the early, in my work from 2006 through 2014, I would look for interesting structures, such as buildings or large commercial machinery. I also looked for interesting organic textures. I would combine these photos in Photoshop to form an ambiguous image. I like the idea of man-made and organic objects deteriorating into one another, forming something new. And here's an example of how that worked for me. So the two photos I took on the left, the top one is from the Summer Palace in China, and the bottom one is from the Forbidden City. And I took those two photos and I blended them together in Photoshop. I put filters on them. I ripped them up. I rebuilt them. And this is what I've got. Here's another example of taking some different photos and blending them together. The top photo is a photo I took in Pittsburgh. It actually is a high school. It's right there on the river, downtown Pittsburgh. It's for its specialty is the arts. The bottom photo, I don't normally do this, but in this case, I had a friend that I've known since elementary school who has a farm up in Wisconsin who had shared this lovely photo on Facebook, and I reached out to him and I said, "Oh my goodness, can I borrow that? Can I use that? Not borrow. Can I use that in a painting?" And he was gracious enough to say yes. So you can see the mushrooms integrated into the art building here. I ran into an artistic rut during the fall of 2014, and that ran into the early part of 2015. All artists and designers will run into these, and I will be doing another video on discussing how to work through creative ruts and just how to get inspired, get into your creative zone. But at that time, none of my regular kinds of creative starters were working for me. And I realized I really just had to push myself harder. I wasn't pushing myself. So the first step was to introduce another element into my concept stage. In the past, I had worked strictly with Photoshop. So I wondered what would happen if I added another software into that mix. Then the question became, what could the additional software offer that I could not get from Photoshop? Then I asked myself, what would I like to maintain from previous work? And a trip to the Art Institute of Chicago proved to be much inspiration for me. So I got inspired by this work. This work, it's a genre that I had never really been interested in prior to 2014. Although I had seen it, I saw this work a lot. Um, what suddenly appealed to me were the strong geometric forms and the pops of clear negative space. And this is what that led to. So I introduced to my concepts part, I introduced the software Adobe Illustrator. So this piece was a combination of Photoshop and Illustrator. What Illustrator provided to me that was different than Photoshop was it gave me these nice crisp lines, and I was able to pull those around, yank those around, so on and so forth in the digital part of it. I still maintain the colorful organic elements from previous work, but they now are housed in crisp geometric forms. The last element to this mix was I changed the medium. For this piece, I set aside my oil paints and I collaged. I'm using acrylics in this, and a section of this is a digital print that was also included to this piece. So here's some more examples of pieces that came after this that were inspired by this. I'm still evolving. My current work has a more realistic feel to it. I'm inspired by urban display windows and the images that reflect in those windows. I've also been adding some more figurative work to my pieces. So I hope you're interested in seeing some more of my work. Please visit me at my website, dianestaver.com. I'm also on Facebook as Urban Art Diane Staver, or Instagram at Urban Art by Diane. Thank you.